You ever notice that there's a difference, a seeming difference anyway, between alien races portrayed in the Star Trek universe and in the Star Wars universe and many other sci-fi game universes? I've noticed, and this is just my personal opinion, of course, that it appears that as if we have this need to humanize our bad guys or our competition, right? Beginning with, of course, and I've read stuff on this for a long time, over the years. I think Asimov and a couple of the other very early sci-fi writers touched on these subjects about how that it's convenient that most aliens that are encountered in TV shows and in movies have human characteristics and human personality types, if you will. They're universally an unspoken universal law. A majority of intelligent alien species are bipedal, have arms and fingers, faces that we can more or less relate to. And those that do not, especially the ones that remind us of the creepy crawlies and other problematic critters in our own world, tend to be automatically categorized as a threat or a possible threat and are dealt with accordingly. So, then there's the cinematic difference. There's the behind the scenes mechanics, if you will. In Star Wars, aliens are considered quite common, and there's such a huge variety, and they come in all sizes and shapes, which is convenient for the movie creators because every TV series or every movie that they come out with in the Star Wars universe, regardless of what canon they're applying, can be different and new. And that there is no one truly domineering alien species in the Star Wars universe. The humanity would be the dominant force, the dominant species in the known galaxy, which they don't go into great depth, to explain. Now, in Star Trek, in my humble opinion, I've noticed that, especially when we talk about the early versions, let's break off on a tangent for a second on that topic. Unlike Star Wars, which we had the Lucas canon for the lion's share of its creation period, there's a set standard for aliens and what their expectations for them as writers and as producers and as the viewer. It's when Disney took over and started changing some of those things that became a problematic for the fan base. I'm sorry, I can't keep from yawning. That is the nature of my job. I've been up since 5, which is really not that, and I got a little over an hour to wait for my next client to show up here at the restaurant before I can move on to my 3rd job of the morning, and then 2 jobs this afternoon, and then I'll be up all night with 2 other jobs. Hence the reason I have this tendency to yawn at all hours of the day and night, even though I am swilling down a coffee. So back onto the tangent, right? All right, let's just get back on the focus. So in Star Trek, we have some pretty dominant early generation races. So unlike Star Wars, Star Trek has, at least now we're working on 3 different tangent universes, if you will. You've got the original Gene Roddenberry and his canon and his philosophy, although it was very heavily tread upon in later TV series following DS9 and Voyager. Each one seemed to become a bit more aggressive, a bit more conflict based, as opposed to exploration and discovery. And then we get the Abrams canon, or the Calvin timeline as they start calling it, where it's a reboot of the original TV series with a different Captain Kirk and crew and a different Enterprise, and it too is a more aggressive type of timeline. And now we have the newest TV series called Discovery, which I only watched the first couple episodes and then became lost in what it was trying to achieve. And at that point I thought, you know what, I'm going to not watch any more of it until I get a hook on wanting to do so. They lost me at the extreme radical change that they created for the Klingons, which kind of fits into my line of discourse here. So, unlike Star Wars and Star Trek, you have these domineering races, these alpha races, that humanity itself finds itself not the top dog in its universe. It always constantly at odds with more powerful, more prolific in some cases, alien races, especially ones who are technologically superior to humanity. Humanity uses its abilities to negotiate and to talk its way into alliances with other alien species that have common goals or commonalities, plus the possibility that as a superpower, so to speak, there's no one truly dominant. I mean, if the early Andorian Empire ran up against the Klingons in an all-out war over territory, the odds are really good the Andorians are going to lose the war, because they just don't have the numbers or the resources or the ships or firepower that the Klingons can bring to bear. And so says the difference between the Vulcans and the Romulans, so on and so forth. So, when we look at the personality types of these alpha races, the Klingons are aggressive, domineering, straightforward, conniving to some degree. No, I guess they have a bit of duplicity in there when it serves their purpose. And in a lot of aspects, they're not unlike certain portions of the human mindset and psyche. So they you can look at throughout history and in human development, you can see things like the Vikings and the Mongolians in their aggressive mindsets and their constant warfare against their neighbors for dominance and for control of resources and territory as an example of the Klingons. And maybe a poor example of some of your opinions, and you're welcome to those opinions, and I more than value any of you who wish to get your 2 cents worth in. The same said for both the Vulcans and the Romulans. The Romulans are an aggressive spacefaring empire that threatens the Federation on several occasions, and they are the lost brothers or cousins of the Vulcans who had split away back in Vulcan history, as you all know, and embraced their emotional side, which, if you look at the way they're portrayed in the canon, in the movies, in the various timelines, that they have a different set of human characteristics applied to them. Now, that's not to say that the Klingons can't be compassionate. It's just extremely rare. And most Klingons might look at their fellow compassionate Klingon as somebody who needs to be hospitalized for mental evaluation. The Romulans are also aggressive and territorial, but they're high-minded. They are machinistic to some degree. They are the uber concept of a A-class male, a male-dominant society who everybody strives to be the best of the best and are not adverse to using conniving chicanery to get what they desire, as long as they don't get caught at it. And that's another corner of human psyche split off. Then we look at the Cardassians. The Cardassians that came later show a lot of other human tendencies that are quite understandable and comprehensible to us. The Ferengi, as alien seeming as they are, they're some of the more alien of the aliens as far as physical looks to some degree, but the commonality there is greed and avarice and industry and this mercantile, money-making, money-grubbing mindset, which is another yet facet of the human psyche. You see that if you get the idea, you get to begin to see what I'm looking at here. That majority of the prime races in the Star Trek canon are mirrors of a portion of the human psyche. They are what we could be if those certain traits dominated our actions and our mindset and our drives and so on. And if the lion's share of our population followed the same dominant traits, which isn't how it works in humanity. We have all those traits, and they vary significantly from one individual to the other, which is what makes our society function to some degree, because we have plenty of people who will achieve and will do the things that need to be done, and plenty of people who will put their nose to the grindstone and work and do all those mundane things that the others don't want to do, and so on and so forth. I'm just pointing that out. So when I looked at these differences, and there's a reason why I'm talking about this subject in the beginning, because like I said, in a few weeks, I'm going to start working my way through my FASA collection of Star Trek, the role-playing game from the 80s, and I think some of this is good stuff to be discussing, or at least getting into mind. I know that there's a lot of information out there on Star Trek itself. Lots of variety out there. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with FASA's version of Star Trek. And probably quite a few of you that are not, because it's before your time, if you will, or it wasn't your thing. And in the early days, Star Trek, the TV series and the comic, the cartoon series, and some of the very early movies that involve the original crew are what formed the core conceptual basis for FASA Star Trek. So we have a lot of Gene Roddenberry's tacit mindset in there, and his goals and beliefs for what the high ideals of the Federation should be, and so on and so forth. But it's also tempered with the realities that probably not going to find that grand, or that and I'm lacking the word for it. I know a word, but I just can't pull it out of my hat at the moment, for this view that Roddenberry had and his concept for the TV series. In reality, it's probably the later TV series and movies probably do a much better job of how the realities of the world. So when we talk about Star Trek and Starfleet not being militarized, for example, being an exploration first, and yet over and over and over and over again, there's conflict. So, an aggressive, domineering conflict, and this is no different. So, when we look at FASA put out a series of books and source books on the Klingons and on the Romulans and on the Orions, because they were the three dominant species that you're most likely to encounter in the role-playing game based off of the original TV series. Later alien races that came along, FASA doesn't have anything for them because, well, they came along later, and FASA is no longer producing or in production at all, and stopped producing Star Trek sometime in the mid or early 90s. Their version of it anyway. It got away, I think it got up into movie 4 and 5. I think maybe as far as Undiscovered Country, but don't quote me on that. I know I got movie a source book for movie 4, and I think a source book for movie 5. But at that point, they stopped producing stuff. Most of it is older school Star Trek with an aggressive tendency that we see coming out in later movies. So there you have it. A little bit of thought of comparing our humans need to compartmentalize the alien species from one sci-fi system to another. Till next time, this is Fat Man saying, game on, right?